"Save me from the tracks. I'll be your wife and do whatever you want," said the Comanche to the rancher. The sun was low in the sky, spreading a dull orange light over the wide land. The wind moved slowly through the dry grass, making a soft sound, like the land itself was breathing. Far away, a long iron track cut through the earth, straight and cold, shining faintly under the fading light. It was a new thing in this old land, something that did not belong, but it was there now, impossible to ignore. Near those tracks stood a young Comanche woman. Her feet were bare, dusty, and sore. Her dress was torn from days of running and hiding. Her hair, once neatly tied, now fell loose around her face. Her eyes were wide, not with weakness, but with fear sharpened by long suffering. She had been running for hours, maybe longer. Time had lost its meaning. All she knew was that she could not stop. Behind her was danger. Not one single enemy, but many things at once. Hunger, cruelty, people who no longer saw her as human, and a world that had decided her kind no longer had a place in it. Her village was gone. Her family was gone. Some had been taken away, some had fallen, and some had simply disappeared into the dust of history. She had survived, but survival had become a heavy burden. She reached the tracks without meaning to. Her legs were shaking, her chest burned with every breath. She stepped onto the wooden ties, thinking only of moving forward. Then she heard it, a deep, distant sound, a long cry that did not come from an animal or the wind, the train. At first, it was only a faint vibration under her feet. Then the sound grew louder, heavier, like thunder rolling across the plains. She turned her head and saw it far down the line, a dark shape moving fast, breathing smoke into the sky. It was coming straight toward her. She tried to move. Her body refused. Fear wrapped around her legs like chains. She had run too long, suffered too much. For a brief moment she thought this might be the end, and part of her felt tired enough to accept it. But then instinct screamed louder than fear. She looked around wildly. The land was open and empty. No trees close enough, no place to hide. The train was closer now, its sound cutting through her head. The ground shook. The air felt tight. That was when she saw him, a man on a horse riding along a fence line not far from the tracks. He was broad-shouldered, dressed in simple ranch clothes, dust covering his boots. He had been checking his land, thinking about nothing more than the work waiting for him before dark. He had not expected to see anyone, especially not her. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. A woman standing on the tracks, frozen like a deer. And not just any woman, her dark hair, her skin, her clothes told him she was Comanche. His horse slowed as he stared, unsure what to do. Then he heard the train. His heart jumped. He looked from the train to the woman and back again. She was going to be hit. There was no time to think carefully, no time to weigh right or wrong the way people usually did. There was only a moment. The woman saw him clearly now. Hope and fear crashed together inside her. She knew what he was, a white rancher, a man from the world that had taken everything from her people. But she also knew one truth above all others. He was alive, strong, and close enough to help. She lifted her voice, rough from thirst and running. The words came out broken, desperate, shaped by fear more than pride. "Save me from the tracks," she cried. "I will be your wife. I will do whatever you want." The words shocked even her as she spoke them. They were not a promise of love. They were not even a true offer. They were a cry from someone standing at the edge of death, willing to trade anything, honor, future, herself, for one more chance to live. The rancher stiffened in his saddle. Her words hit him harder than the sound of the train. He had grown up hearing stories about Comanche people, most of them filled with fear and hate. He had also seen enough suffering on the frontier to know those stories were not the whole truth. He did not think of her as an offer. He saw her terror, her exhaustion, her humanity. The train was dangerously close now. He did not answer her. Instead, he kicked his horse forward. The animal surged ahead, hooves pounding the earth. The rancher leaned low, reaching out as he came alongside the tracks. The woman stumbled toward him, nearly falling. At the last second, he grabbed her arm with all his strength and pulled. They tumbled together off the tracks, rolling hard into the dirt as the train rushed past, screaming, shaking the ground. Wind and dust filled the air. The noise was so loud it felt like the world was tearing apart. Then, just as suddenly as it came, it was gone. Silence followed, broken only by the woman's uneven breathing and the soft snort of the horse nearby. She lay still, staring at the sky, unable to believe she was alive. Her whole body trembled. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes, not loud or dramatic, but quiet and unstoppable. The rancher pushed himself up, chest heaving. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. She was thin, bruised, and clearly worn down by hardship. But there was something else in her face too, strength that had not been broken even after everything. "You're safe now," he said, his voice low and unsure. She turned her head toward him. She did not smile. She did not repeat her offer. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if acknowledging something deeper than words. Life had been given back to her, but at a cost she did not yet understand. He helped her sit up. She flinched at his touch, then forced herself to relax. Trust did not come easily anymore. Still, she allowed it because she had no other choice. "My name is Thomas," he said after a moment. "I have a ranch not far from here." She hesitated. Then she spoke her name softly, as if it belonged to a time before everything was taken. Saying it out loud made her chest ache. They sat there as the sun dipped lower, two strangers brought together by a moment that could not be undone. The land around them did not care who they were or where they came from. It only stretched on, wide and silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Thomas knew helping her would bring trouble. The town would talk. People would question him. Some would threaten him. He could already feel the weight of that future pressing down. She knew staying with him could mean losing herself piece by piece, adapting to a world that did not want her to exist as she was. Yet neither of them stood up to walk away. The tracks lay behind them now, empty and quiet. Death had passed them by, but life, with all its complications and pain, was still waiting. And neither of them understood yet that this single moment, this rescue born from fear and choice, had changed the direction of both their lives forever. Thomas did not take her to town. That thought crossed his mind only once, and he pushed it away just as quickly. Town meant questions. It meant stares, whispers, and men who believed they had the right to decide who belonged and who did not. The woman beside him did not need that. Not now. Instead, he helped her onto his horse. She hesitated, then climbed up slowly, her movements careful, as if her body no longer trusted the ground beneath it. Thomas walked beside the horse, holding the reins, moving at a steady pace so she would not fall. The ranch was only a short ride away, but it felt longer, stretched by silence and uncertainty. The land around them was quiet. The sky had turned soft purple, and the first stars were beginning to appear. Grasshoppers jumped through the dry field. Somewhere far off, a bird cried out before settling for the night. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful for what had just happened. She watched everything closely. Every sound made her tense. Every shadow felt like a threat. Even though she was no longer near the tracks, fear still followed her like a second skin. When they reached the ranch, she saw a simple wooden house, a barn, and a fenced area where a few animals moved slowly. It was not a rich place, but it was strong and well cared for. The fence stood straight. The roof was solid. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, telling her someone lived here with purpose. Thomas tied the horse and stepped back, unsure of what to do next. He had lived alone for years. His life followed a simple pattern: work at dawn, food at noon, rest when the sun went down. Now that pattern was broken. "You can stay here tonight," he said carefully, "just to rest. We'll talk more in the morning." She studied his face. She had learned to read people quickly. Lies, anger, danger, those things left marks, but his face showed none of that. Only caution and something close to concern. She nodded. Inside the house, everything felt strange to her. The smell of cooked food, old wood, and clean cloth filled the air. There were only a few pieces of furniture, all worn but sturdy. Thomas set a lamp on the table, lighting the room with a warm glow. She stood near the door, not knowing where to put herself. Her hand stayed close to her body as if she was afraid something might be taken from her again. Thomas noticed. "You can sit," he said, pointing to a chair. "You're not in trouble here." Slowly she sat. He brought her a cup of water first. She drank it in small sips, careful not to make herself sick. Then he placed a bowl of food in front of her. It was simple: bread, beans, and a little meat. But the smell alone made her eyes fill with tears. She had not eaten properly in days. "Take your time," he said, stepping back. She did. Each bite felt like proof that she was still alive, that the world had not fully ended. When she finished, she felt warmth spread through her body, easing some of the tightness in her chest. After that, Thomas showed her a small room with a narrow bed and clean blankets. "You can sleep here," he said. "I'll be in the other room." She touched the blanket with her fingers, surprised by how soft it felt. For a moment she stood still, then spoke quietly. "Thank you." He nodded and left her alone. That night, sleep did not come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw running feet, fire, and faces she could no longer reach. She woke more than once, heart racing, expecting danger. But each time the room stayed quiet. The walls did not move. No one came. By morning the sun filled the room with pale light. She sat up slowly, listening. From outside she heard the sound of work, wood moving, metal clinking, a steady rhythm, life continuing. She stepped outside carefully. Thomas was near the barn, repairing a loose board. He looked up when he saw her. "Morning," he said. She nodded. "Morning." For a moment neither of them spoke. The day stretched open before them, full of questions. "I won't force you to stay," Thomas said finally. "But if you go to town alone, it won't be easy. People talk, people judge." She already knew this. She had seen the way eyes followed her kind, the way doors closed. "I don't have anywhere else," she said honestly. He nodded again. "Then you can stay as long as you need." She looked at him closely. "Not because of what I said yesterday." "No," he answered quickly. "Not because of that." Something inside her loosened just a little. The days that followed were quiet but tense. She helped where she could, carrying water, cleaning, learning the small tasks that kept the ranch running. Thomas did not order her, he asked. And when she said no, he accepted it. That mattered more than he knew. Still, the world outside did not disappear. Riders passed by sometimes. Neighbors stopped to talk. When they saw her, their faces changed. Some said nothing, some said too much. "She Comanche?" one man asked, not bothering to lower his voice. Thomas stood firm. "She's under my roof." That answer did not satisfy everyone. At night, Thomas sat at the table thinking. He knew trouble would come. Helping her was not a small choice, but sending her away felt worse. He remembered the fear in her eyes by the tracks. No law or rule could make him forget that. She noticed his worry. One evening, as the sun sank low, she spoke. "If I cause problems," she said slowly, "I can leave." Thomas shook his head. "You didn't cause anything, the world did." She looked down at her hands. "The world always does." They shared silence after that, not empty but thoughtful. Trust did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces. When she slept through the night without waking in fear. When he left the house and believed it would still be standing when he returned. When they worked side by side without watching each other's every move. Yet beneath it all, the memory of her words by the tracks remained. A promise spoken in terror, hanging between them like a shadow. Neither of them mentioned it again. They both knew it had been said, and they both knew it did not define what would come next. But outside the ranch, the world was already watching, already deciding. And soon, staying silent would no longer be enough. The weeks passed slowly, like the steady movement of clouds across the open sky. Each day followed the one before it, yet nothing felt simple. The woman learned the shape of the ranch, the sound of the morning wind, and the way the animals moved when they trusted someone. Thomas learned the quiet signs of her moods, the way she grew still when strangers rode by, the way she watched the horizon as if it might suddenly turn against her. They spoke little at first. Words felt heavy. When they did speak, it was about work. Water needed to be carried. Grain needed to be stored. Fences needed repair. These small tasks gave shape to the days and kept their thoughts from drifting too far into the past. She worked hard, not because she was told to, but because it made her feel useful. In her old life, work had been part of belonging. To do nothing felt like waiting to disappear. Thomas noticed her effort and respected it. He never treated her like she owed him anything. That, more than food or shelter, helped her breathe more freely. Sometimes, as they worked side by side, memories rose up without warning. The smell of earth after water reminded her of her family's land. The sound of birds at dawn brought back voices she would never hear again. When that happened, her hands would slow and her eyes would darken. Thomas never asked questions during those moments. He had learned that pain did not always want an answer. Sometimes it only wanted space. One afternoon, while fixing a broken fence, a rider appeared on the road. The man slowed his horse, eyes moving quickly from Thomas to the woman. "Didn't know you had company," the rider said, his tone sharp with curiosity. Thomas straightened. "Just passing through," he replied calmly. The rider's gaze lingered too long. "Looks like more than that." The woman kept her head down, but she felt the weight of that look. It was the kind she knew well, the kind that decided things without asking. The rider laughed softly. "Be careful," he said before moving on. "People talk." When he was gone, silence settled again, but it was different now, heavier. That night Thomas could not sleep. He sat at the table long after the lamp had burned low. The ranch had always been a place where he could breathe. Now it felt exposed, like a single light in a wide, dark field. The woman noticed his worry the next morning. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "People like him," Thomas sighed. "I know." She hesitated, then spoke again. "Where I come from, when trouble comes, it comes fast." He met her eyes. "Then we'll be ready." For the first time, she believed him. As days passed, they began to share small stories, not the painful ones, not yet, just pieces. She told him how her people followed the seasons, how children learned by watching, not by being told. He told her about growing up on land that never felt quite like home until he built something of his own. They laughed once, unexpectedly, when a stubborn animal refused to move. The sound surprised them both. It faded quickly, but it left something behind, a reminder that not all moments had to hurt. Still, the past did not stay quiet for long. One evening, as the sun burned red along the horizon, voices rose from the road. Two men approached the ranch, walking instead of riding. That alone made Thomas uneasy. They stopped near the fence. "We heard you're keeping a Comanche here," one of them said. Thomas stepped forward. "She's staying with me." The other man crossed his arms. "That's not going to sit well." "She hasn't done anything wrong," Thomas replied. The men exchanged looks. "That doesn't always matter." The woman stood in the doorway watching. Her body was still, but inside fear stirred. She had seen this before, words turning into threats. Threats turning into something worse. Thomas did not raise his voice. "You can leave now." After a long pause, they did, but not without one last look that promised trouble. That night, the woman could not sleep. She sat on her bed, hands clenched, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. Finally, she stood and walked into the main room. Thomas was awake, too. "I should go," she said, "before this gets worse." He shook his head slowly. "Running didn't save you before." She flinched, not at his words, but at the truth in them. "I don't want to bring danger to your door," she said. "You didn't bring it," he answered. "It was already out there." They stood facing each other, the lamp casting long shadows. For the first time, they spoke of the moment by the tracks. "I said those words because I thought I was about to die," she said. "I didn't mean "I know," Thomas said gently. "You don't owe me anything." Tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "Then why stay?" He thought for a long moment. "Because helping you felt right, and because sending you away would feel wrong." Something changed then, not suddenly, not completely, but enough. From that night on, they were no longer just two people sharing space. They were standing together, whether they said it out loud or not. The land around the ranch seemed to notice. Storms came and went. Grass grew taller. Days passed into weeks. And though danger still hovered at the edges, so did something else, belonging, fragile but real. She began to hum while working, soft sounds from her old world. Thomas listened without asking. He liked the way it filled the quiet. Yet both of them knew peace like this did not last forever. Somewhere beyond the horizon, decisions were being made. Lines were being drawn. And soon, the choice to stand together would be tested in ways neither of them could yet see. For now, they worked. They waited. And they held onto the small, hard-earned truth that trust, once begun, was not easily undone. At first, it was small things. Riders passing more often. Conversations stopping when Thomas entered town alone to buy supplies. Faces turning away, then turning back again to watch from a distance. The woman felt it too. She sensed it in the quiet pauses, in the way the land no longer felt fully open. She had lived long enough among fear to recognize its shape. One afternoon, while Thomas was away repairing a fence on the far side of the property, two riders appeared near the ranch house. She was alone. The sound of hooves tightened her chest, but she did not run. Running had taught her only one lesson. It never truly ended danger. The men stopped near the fence. They did not cross it, not yet. "You shouldn't be here," one of them said. She stood straight. Her hands were calm at her sides. "I am not bothering anyone." The other man laughed softly. "That's not how people see it." She met their eyes. "People see what they want." The men stayed a moment longer, then rode away. They left no threat spoken aloud, but the message was clear enough. When Thomas returned and heard what happened, his jaw tightened. He said nothing at first. That worried her more than anger would have. That evening he told her the truth. "There's talk in town," he said. "Some folks want you gone. They say you don't belong here." She nodded slowly. "I know. They think I'm causing trouble by letting you stay." She looked at him. "Are you?" He answered without hesitation. "No." Silence followed, heavy but honest. "They may come back," he continued. "Not just to talk." She felt a familiar ache in her chest. "Then I should leave before that happens." Thomas stood up sharply. "No." She looked at him in surprise. "I won't send you away to make others comfortable," he said. "That's not right." Her voice was quiet. "Right doesn't always keep people safe." He softened then. "Neither does giving in." That night sleep refused both of them. The ranch, once a place of steady routine, felt like a line drawn in the dirt, a place that demanded a choice. The next day a letter arrived. No name. Just a warning written in rough words. Thomas read it once, then folded it and placed it on the table. She did not ask what it said. She already knew. Later that afternoon, a small group of men came riding in. They stopped near the fence just as before, but this time they did not leave. Thomas walked out to meet them. "She needs to go," one man said, "before things get ugly." "She's staying," Thomas replied. "This land isn't meant for people like her." Thomas's voice stayed calm but firm. "This land is meant for those who live honestly on it." The men looked at each other. One of them shook his head. "You're making a mistake." "Then it's mine to make." The woman watched from the doorway. Fear pressed against her ribs, but something else stood beside it now. Pride, and a strange, careful hope. The men eventually left, but the tension remained. It sat in the air, heavy and waiting. Days passed under that weight. Each sound at night felt louder. Each distant rider raised questions. Thomas made sure everything was secured. He never said it aloud, but he was preparing for the worst. She saw it and felt the guilt grow inside her. One evening, as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, she spoke again. "I never wanted this," she said. "For you, He looked at her. I know. I was ready to disappear before, she continued. That's how my life has been, but you pulled me back. Now others might pay for it. You didn't ask me to, he said gently. She swallowed. I know. That makes it harder. They sat in silence, the sound of the wind moving through the grass around them. There is something you should understand, she said after a while. If I stay, this will not be the last test. He nodded. Life rarely gives just one. Her eyes met his. Standing with me may cost you more than you think. He did not look away. Standing alone costs more. That was the moment she understood. This was no longer about shelter or survival. It was about choice. A few nights later, the test came. Voices rose outside the ranch, angry and loud. Shadows moved near the fence. Thomas stepped outside, steady and unarmed. She followed, though he tried to stop her. The men spoke harshly, demanding again that she be sent away. Thomas refused. The air felt thin, ready to break. She stepped forward then. I will not hide, she said clearly. I will not beg. I am here because I was given help when I needed it. That is all. The men stared, surprised by her calm. If you want me gone, she continued, say it plainly. But do not pretend this is about peace. For a long moment, no one spoke. The tension stretched, fragile as glass. Then slowly, the men backed away. Not because they had changed their minds, but because the cost of crossing that line had become uncertain. When they were gone, the night felt different, still dangerous but quieter. Inside the house, her hands began to shake. The strength she had shown faded, leaving the weight behind. Thomas noticed. You don't have to be strong all the time, he said. She sat down heavily. I don't know how not to be. He did not answer right away. Then he said, maybe you're not alone anymore. That night, for the first time, she slept without dreaming of running. The danger had not ended, but something had shifted. Fear no longer stood between them. It stood outside, and both of them understood that whatever came next, it would come to both of them together. The days after that night were quiet, but the quiet was different now. It was no longer the fragile silence of waiting. It was the steady kind that comes after a hard truth has been faced. The ranch still stood. The land still stretched wide and open, and the woman was still there. Thomas woke each morning with the same routine, but his thoughts had changed. He no longer wondered whether helping her had been a mistake. That question had already been answered. What remained was how to live with the choice he had made. The woman felt the change too. Fear did not leave her completely, but it loosened its grip. She no longer jumped at every sound. She no longer felt like she was standing on the edge of being pushed away. Slowly, carefully, she allowed herself to breathe. They worked together as they always had, but something deeper moved beneath the surface. Trust, once fragile, had grown stronger. Not loud or dramatic, but solid, like roots spreading quietly underground. One morning, Thomas told her he needed to go into town. Supplies were low. He watched her closely as he spoke, expecting worry. She surprised him. I'll be here when you get back, she said simply. That was enough. When he returned later that day, the ranch was just as he had left it. She was outside, tending to a small patch of ground she had cleared near the house. It was nothing grand, just a few plants pushing through the soil. What is that? He asked. She smiled softly. Something living, something that stays. He nodded, understanding more than he could put into words. Not everyone in town stayed silent. Some still watched from a distance, some still whispered, but no one came to the ranch again. The line had been drawn and it held. Weeks turned into months. The seasons began to change. The heat softened. The air grew cooler. The land prepared for rest, and so did they. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sky fade into deep blue, she spoke of her past for the first time. She did not tell everything, only enough. She spoke of family, of songs sung at night, of stories passed from one generation to the next. She spoke of loss without naming every wound. Thomas listened without interrupting, without asking questions that did not need answers. When she finished, there were tears in her eyes, but also relief. Thank you for telling me, he said quietly. She nodded. Thank you for listening. After that, she asked him about his life before the ranch. He spoke of loneliness, of hard choices, of building something with his own hands because it was the only way he knew how to belong. They realized then how different their lives had been and how similar the loneliness felt. The promise she had spoken by the tracks no longer hovered between them. It had faded into the past, replaced by something earned. One night as the fire burned low, she said, "I don't want to leave." He looked at her, surprised by the simple honesty of it. "I don't want you to," he replied. They did not rush anything after that. There was no sudden change, no dramatic moment, just small steps, shared meals, shared work, shared silence. Eventually, the town noticed something else. The ranch did not fall apart, trouble did not come, life continued. Time did what force could not. It softened edges, it wore down anger, it made the unusual feel familiar. When winter came, it came hard. Cold winds swept across the land. Snow covered the fields. The house became a place of warmth and closeness. They spent long evenings talking, reading, or simply sitting together while the fire cracked softly. During one of those evenings, Thomas spoke. "I won't pretend the world will suddenly become kind," he said, "but if you want a future here, I'm willing to face what comes." She looked at him for a long time. "I don't need saving anymore," she said, "but I would choose to stay." That was the truth of it. No bargains. No fear, just choice. When spring returned, it brought new life. The plants she had started near the house grew stronger. The land responded to care. So did they. In time, they stood together openly, not hiding, not apologizing. Some people accepted it, some did not. But it no longer ruled their days. The woman found her place, not as something owned, not as someone rescued, but as someone who had survived and decided to live. Thomas found something he had not known he was missing, not control, not praise, but partnership. The tracks where they first met remained in the distance, a reminder of how close life and loss can stand side by side. But they no longer defined her story. What defined it was what followed. A life rebuilt slowly, a choice made daily. Two people standing together, not because of fear, but because they wanted to. And that, more than any promise spoken in desperation, became the truest ending of all.